Thank you,
Proceed.
Mr. President. I raised this afternoon to lend my voice in support to this Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Bill. Mr. President, I'm of the view that a good, well-working, well-functioning healthcare system is essential for the growth and development of any country. From as early as 1960s, Mr. President, the Barbados government sought to ensure that its people had access to universal health care, a universal health care system that was rooted in the belief that persons should have access to decent health care regardless of their ability to pay for that health care. I believe over the years, successive governments have tried to ensure that the country's premier healthcare provider was in a position to carry out that particular mandate of ensuring the healthcare of the people of this country. However, perhaps in the last, if I were to put a number to it, I would say in the last 10 years or so, we have seen the gradual deterioration of conditions and, in some cases, the service at the QH hospital. I'm sure that each and every one of us can relate to some horror story or some story if we were fortunate enough not to have had the unfortunate experience of having been a patient there, of the conditions that exist at the QH. Over the years, that place has moved from a place of healing to, in some persons' estimation, a place of horror. And I suspect, Mr. President, that is what we might have inherited when we took the reins of government just last year, 2018. And Mr. President, these amendments, it is my belief, were put in place in an effort to change the image, change the management, change the image, change the direction of the QH hospital, so that at some point it will return to a place of healing, a place where when persons go there, there's a good expectation that the treatment that they receive there is one that will lend to the healing of their bodies, one that they felt comfortable and confident in their mind that a person going there will get the necessary treatment that they need. But what we've been hearing coming out of the mouths of persons who would have been there in the past couple of years was almost the opposite. And when a study was done this year by the current Board of Management, the one that was put in place in 2018, a number of things were discovered that were at the very least disturbing. Disturbing. I'm just going to list some of them, and perhaps if I can draw on some anecdotal examples of persons who I would have spoken to or have heard about who would have experienced what I'm going to list here this afternoon, Mr. President. There was a lack of equipment and supplies needed by staff to deliver the quality patient care that we have grown accustomed to. You had a situation in the QH hospital where persons were going there and machines were unavailable. Machines were not working. Especially those persons who suffer with, was it kidney failure? Renal failure. Yes, using the technical term. Actually had a relative who would have been having to go on these dialysis machines. You have a situation where machines were not working. Persons were afraid to go there because it made no sense. I had a friend who wanted to come to Barbados on a vacation. She lived in the States, and she was on dialysis. And when she called down and she discovered that the limited access that persons in this country had to dialysis machines, she had to cancel her vacation. She had, and I'm sure there are countless others who would have done their checks, their due diligence, only to discover that it would have been almost detrimental for them to come down here at that time. These are the types of things that we came and found at the QH that we are trying now to address. Another thing listed here was the poor, inadequate, and often unsanitary working conditions for staff. You cannot have a situation where persons are working in an environment where they believe that's unsanitary, that's not clean, especially in a hospital. In a hospital, we're talking about a hospital. And you have persons working in unsanitary conditions. Where you have patients who are susceptible to all kinds of infections, all kinds of sickness. People are already, they're very vulnerable, their immune systems are already compromised. But yet you're hearing that the conditions in the hospital are unsanitary. Things are untenable. Also, I remember a gentleman called me one day and he told me he was an outpatient at the time. He had gotten his toes amputated. He would go in for dressing every Wednesday or so. And oftentimes he'd go to the hospital. There was no dressing, no gauze, no. The things that you need to dress a wound, these things were, you had to buy these things. He literally had to ask a relative to go and buy these things from the pharmacy. These were the things, I mean, it sounds almost ridiculous now when you think about it, but these are the things that were happening at the QH. These were the things that ordinary Barbadians, poor Barbadians, had to endure. Because, and I often say this, sometimes when we get caught up in the legality of it, we get caught up in the historical significance and the nostalgia of it, but we must never lose sight of the fact that we are dealing with ordinary people, ordinary poor people. That hospital was placed there to treat the ordinary poor people with the expectation that when they go in there, they get a decent treatment. And when a person who's already poor, person who's not working because they are sick, because they have suffered some injury or have had an operation, have now to go into the hospital and then look for money when they're not working, to buy the dressing, maybe to buy the ointment, to buy the alcohol, to buy whatever they need to have their wound dressed. This is untenable. This is crazy. But this is what persons were experiencing at the QH hospital under the last administration. And these are the things that we are trying to address. We have to address them. That's why we saw it fit to change the management style at the hospital so that we can do things in quick time. It's not a money issue at the hospital. We already established that in here. There's not a money issue at the hospital. It was a management issue at the hospital. Persons felt it necessary to do all manner of things except what they were being paid to do. That's why we had these issues at the hospital. And you know that when the conditions at the hospital are not right, persons do not feel inspired to leave home, to go there to work. So you had high cases of absenteeism at the hospital. And that has its knock-on effect. Because when I see that my colleague is not coming to work, I become demoralized. I decide that I'm not coming to work. And then you have that shortage of staff. So these are some of the issues that we're faced at the hospital on a daily basis. And what does that do? That places additional burden on those persons who, because they believe in what they're doing, they come to work every day, honestly, to earn an honest dollar. That places additional burden on these people. Increase their stress levels. So you had a situation where persons were falling ill because they were working so hard, because other persons who were supposed to be there in support of them were not showing up on the job. So these are just some of the issues that were faced when the new board took over in 2018. Weak control over supplies and inventory. Stock, as they put it, grew 2 feet and got up and walked out. Yes, got up and walked out. I heard, I don't know who were taking them, but I can only speak to what I've heard people say. They weren't dead. I know when people went in for dressing, there was no stock in some cases. In fact, I can tell you that someone told me that they actually saw. And the record will show, I can say no, that I made a call. I called the PA of the minister, and I reported to him that I was just being told by a patient that he saw someone go into the hospital, who works at the hospital, I think he said, took the stock, took the stuff out from storage, placed it in a bag, and walked out. And there's nobody that can tell me that these things weren't happening. No, you can't get it in here and deny that. These are things that are happening. But you know what all this stems from? It stems from bad and poor leadership. So people develop the belief and the feeling that they can do as they like, because there was no accountability. And that was what was strangling the hospital. That was what was strangling our premier health provider. So, Mr. President, I've heard a lot of what was said about optics, about transparency, about not looking right, not feeling right, not smelling right. I've heard it all. But if you believe that a place is in need of a fix, a hospital was in itself on life support and dying, because that's exactly what was happening. And you felt you had the right person, or you could identify the right doctor who could heal that place. And in your own opinion, honest opinion, and a professional opinion, you felt this person was best suited to heal this place based on that person's track record. Based on that person's track record. You felt that person, along with their team, was the right formula to revise a hospital that was on its deathbed. Then I support it. Jesus. I support it wholeheartedly, Mr. President. A person can say what they like. I trust the wisdom of my Prime Minister. I believe in the wisdom of my Prime Minister and this Barbados Labour Party. So, as I close, Mr. President, I just want to reinforce the point that this amendment was necessary. If we were to move this hospital in the right direction, a new direction, a forward direction, then we have to change the management system at the hospital, because that is where the buck stops. And with those few words, Mr. President, I'm obliged.
Rise to speak on this bill. You know, at first, I wasn't sure I was going to speak on it at all. And I thought about it, and I thought to myself, it would be remiss of me, Mr. President, not just to say a few words on it. I don't want to go over all that has been said. I think the issue of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the issue of this bill has been widely discussed in here, Mr. President. But I just want to say a few things so we can truly understand the significance of what is needed when we make this decision as a government that we're trying to do with regard to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital with the amendments to this act. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital was first opened way back in 1964. There are people, Mr. President, sitting in this Senate chamber that were not born when this hospital, like Senator Tate, I see she's raised her hand, Mr. President. She was not born when this hospital was opened. We weren't. They weren't. There's some who were, but there are many in here who were not born in 1964, November 1964. Now, you know, in life, people don't always want change. We become somewhat complacent and we want to stay with what we know. But the world has changed. 1964 was the 20th century. In 1964, there were a few cars on the Barbados roads. In 1964, there was no transport board buses. They had a whole set of private buses, Elite and Rockland, and all of those. In 1964, people were going to the standpipe to get water. In 1964, the housing stock of Barbados is not what we see today. In 1964, Bajans who lived in a particular part of Barbados would not be able to work in another part of Barbados because of the distance and the cost that would have to travel to get there. It was a different world than the world of today. And the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, when it was opened then, was considered to be state of the art. It was the showpiece of the Caribbean for people who would remember when this occurred. There was hardly anything in the Caribbean that looked like the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in November 1964. The number of doctors trained that are Barbadian doctors, because we would still have been a colony in 1964. We were not even independent. The number of trained, born Barbadian doctors is not what it is today. And the Queen Elizabeth Hospital has been the breeding ground for many successful doctors in this country and in other Caribbean countries as well. And it has been. So the Queen Elizabeth Hospital that we see of today was not the Queen's Hospital of many years ago. But when things need to be changed, we cannot be so dogmatic that we must stick with what we have because we are afraid to make sensible decisions in a 21st century for a 21st century solution. We cannot be. You know, sometimes people become, not that they mean to be difficult, it's just that they've gone into a comfort zone. They know an institution, they've worked in it a long time, they're familiar with the patterns of how it works, what people do, whether good or bad. And when you start to make changes, if it doesn't fit into what they perceive as what they want to do for their own personal selves within an institution, sometimes the changes seem to them ominous or perhaps something that may be deleterious to the overall functioning of them within the institution. But I can assure you that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, like anything else, when you make changes to it that have been done over the years, it can only but improve the institution if those changes fit into what society needs for a current modern day economy. Nowadays, you can go to QH Hospital, unlike the last century, the 20th century, and get all types of specialized care. You have people at the QH Hospital, Mr. President, ear, nose, and throat specialists. Trained since 1970, trained in Barbados, went to the University of the West Indies, another local institution, and trained and worked in the hospital. Ear, nose, and throat specialists. You have people in ophthalmology, in gynecology, in pediatrics, in psychotherapy, radiology, in cardiac surgery and all kinds of cardiac applications, even plastic surgery, because the Queen's Hospital has continued to evolve, and it must continue to evolve. Years ago, when you went to the hospital, you hear people saying they're going to the casualty, the QH casualty. The old days of casualty, the casualty was started with approximately 12 junior doctors, Mr. President, and 2 specialists. 12 junior doctors and 2 specialists. That's how it was started. It then evolved, as it is today, into the accident and emergency, and has over 20 doctors and services over 45,000 patients a year. Now, Mr. President, when you have this situation, it is clear that governments must make sound decisions where they understand that the number of people that they will continue to treat will continue to increase. We have not just people who live in Barbados, but we also have people who come to Barbados for care at our health institution, Mr. President, and that continues because our CARICOM brothers and sisters, some of them, are not as fortunate to have an institution that may offer the same services in their own islands that we are able to offer them, and certainly at a rate and cost that may be, I don't want to use the word cheaper, but less expensive than you would find, Mr. President, in sometimes more developed countries. So you're not just treating your own local Barbadians, but CARICOM citizens, and then of course the numerous visitors, numerous tourists that come to our shores every year. That hospital, our sole hospital that does these types of surgeries and treatments here on this island, can be provided for them if need be. Because unfortunately, sometimes when you travel, you run into particular circumstances where you become ill and you will need to be treated. So you want to therefore, Mr. President, improve the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And one of the steps here in this amendment and adjustment is towards improving the QEH and making it more efficient. I personally have watched over the last year and some months the current Minister of Health, Mr. President, Minister Bostic, and his team. And they have been performing an admirable job in trying to make the necessary changes that we know are needed to bring this institution back to its glory days of 1964, where it once again is the jewel. It was the jewel of the Caribbean health institutions. And you would want to see it come back to that, or as close to that as we can get. Now, do people nowadays, when they're running an institution, I know there are people in here who remember the days when you're running your institution, whether it's a government or a company, you're using a ledger to do your accounts. You don't hear anybody talking about ledgers now? You don't see people with the big long books with the squares. They're using computers. people, when they have a company or anything that they're running that's a business, they use modern applications to make it more efficient, right down, Mr. President, to the positions that they have within those institutions, which we know are tried and proven positions and techniques that allow those institutions to progress and to develop and to modernize and to serve the interests of the people of those countries. And we would want the same thing here in Barbados for our country and for our healthcare institution. I'm not here to talk about the nightmare stories and all of that, but everybody knows them. People can see all the stuff they want to see on social media and read the newspapers and all of that. What I'm here and in support of this amendment is because I know it's the right thing to do. When you know you have an institution that needs change, one needs to make changes that one sees are what is necessary for that institution to progress. Because if you never made changes and brought companies and entities into a modern framework, your country would not progress. We saw that, and I don't want to be overly critical, Mr. President, but we saw that in not just QEH, but other institutions over the last few years. There were all kinds of reasons for it. But the reality is they were there. And then what ends up happening is that your country then is left behind. We do not want Barbadians to go elsewhere for medical care. We want to have medical care here. I know there's some Barbadians that go abroad for medical care, but that's a minority of people. How many people can afford to go up to some of these developed countries where hospital stay is, $5,000 a night and those kind of costs? You go to buy an aspirin and it's $25 for one, and by the time they leave the hospital, the bill is $160,000 or $180,000. We know those nightmare stories. It has happened to our own citizens when they travel, and sometimes they become ill and something happens to them. But the reality is that if you have a functioning institution that's making the necessary changes, it can't happen overnight. But when it does happen, it brings your institution back into a modern day framework that offers services in a manner that your citizens can benefit from. One has to then make the determination that this is the best course of action for the country. And that's why, Mr. President, I am 100% in support of this amendment. Now, I want to say something else about the QEH. All institutions have issues, because there's no perfect world, so no perfect institutions. But the QEH, like anywhere else, Mr. President, they have good staff. They have good doctors and nurses. If the nurses, Mr. President, that work in these institutions in Barbados were not good, the foreign countries that are employing them and taking them away from our shores would not be doing so. That's simple. You don't need me to say that. I think that is pretty apparent, Mr. President, that the staff clearly are competent. Otherwise, people would not be taking them away. Many of the doctors that work at the QEH, Mr. President, as well, extremely competent, working all over the world, United States and England and Canada, trained right here in the Caribbean. Some of them interned or did a residency here, and yet they're able to leave these shores and readily get employment in other parts of the world, because there's a level of competency of the people that work at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. What the Queen Elizabeth Hospital needs, Mr. President, is a change of its structure, a change of its management, and of course, a modernization of its plant, and clearly, prudent financial management. And I have the utmost confidence, I said before in closing, Mr. President, in the Minister of Health and his team and the board of the Queen Elizabeth hospital as well as the staff, and that I know they will understand that there's a need for these changes for this institution to move forward. And with those few words, Mr. President, I'm obliged to you.
Mr. President, as I rise to wrap up the debate on this bill, I want to first of all thank all honourable members who have spoken, have noted your concerns, and we recognize it is a very important bill in terms of the importance of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to all Barbadians, and it becomes quite a sensitive issue. I've heard the comments in terms of the responses as it speaks to the management and the structure of the board, and they have been duly noted. But I also understand that the government's intention, which is to make the QH a much more efficient and better run and better equipped entity to look after the welfare of all Barbadians. And so I want to thank you all for your comments and your suggestions. And with those few words, Mr. President, I want to beg that this bill be now read a second time.
The question is that the bill under consideration be now read a second time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg that you do now, Your Honor, do. And the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of this bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. We are now in committee.
The Senate is in committee.
Clause 1.
Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand par.
The question is that Clause 1 stand apart. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Honourable Senators against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand apart. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Honourable Senators against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 3 stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand apart. Honourable Senators in favor?
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering with respect to clause 3, and this is just really in terms of numbering, if we should not have, it is on. I'm sorry, I'm hoarse, but here we go. Can you hear me now? Okay. With respect to clause 3, we have the board shall appoint as employees a chief operations officer and the following executive directors. The executive directors are referred to individually from A to G, but we do not have a separate numerical value for the chief operations officer. So I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be tidier to have a separate number for the chief operations officer, then numbering for the executive directors, and then go on with the rest of that clause. I also noticed that with subclause 2, if that's the right reference, executive directors has a common E and a common D, but they are referred to with a capital E and a capital D when they are referred to individually. So I was wondering if we needed to also get that sorted out as well. Yeah, I'm asking.
Mr. Chairman, as in terms of the clause 2, the board shall appoint employees as A. I'm suggesting it would be, the suggestion I believe is A, chief operations officer, and then it would change, that's what you're suggesting. So there would be A, chief operations officer, then B, executive director of HR, that's what you're suggesting.
It could be that, if it is that you want to. The board shall appoint, yes, we can do it that way.
That's the easiest way.
A chief operations officer, and then B would be the following executive directors, and then you do 1, 2, 3, 4, or you want to just keep going.
You're going to change the letters. So it'd be A here would become B.
A chief operations officer, and then,
Executive director would be B. Medical services would
so you're
be
not
C.
going to make a general, the following executive directors, you're going to remove that as well? So you're just going to say A, chief operations officer, B, executive director.
Exactly, and remove that.
So we would take out and the following executive director?
Yes.
No? Oh, well, okay.
So that's agreed? Okay. It would be the board shall appoint as employees A, chief operations officer. We delete and the following executive directors, and we just change where it is A, the human resources will be B, medical director will be C, nursing will be D.
But sorry, Mr. Senator Walker, the challenge with doing this without looking at the principal act is you don't know if what we're suggesting is consistent with what is in the principal act.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that clause 3 stand parked.
Mr. Chairman, I am requesting or I'm suggesting that there needs to be further clarity to this section.
Mr. Chairman, I sought to do so, and the member then went on to, I believe, to try to amend the entire clause. I'm asking that clause 3 stand parked, as it is.
And all I was trying to do, Mr. Chairman, is to be prudent because we're trying to do an amendment without the principal act. So therefore, since we are not draft people, I'm just seeking to make sure that what we are proposing is actually going to make sense. And I suggest that we ask the persons that would know for guidance. That's the reason that they're here. Is that not so? What you
That is
don't
what
want is
I
to
tried
suggest
to
an
do.
amendment and then there's something wrong with what we're proposing with the A, B, C, D,
But,
whatever.
excuse me, if I may, CPC suggested the amendment to accommodate your claim.
We went to the entity charged with drafting.
That's what, if it's CPC, says CPC.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the original act, it said, the board shall appoint as employees a chief executive officer by whatever name called and the following directors. CPC, all they did was to change the chief executive officer to a chief operations officer. In the original act, it then continued A, Director of Human Resources, B, Director of Medical Services, C, Director of Nursing Services, D, Director. They followed it as it was in the original act. The honourable member has asked that we follow a sequence. The recommendation is that we call the board shall employ as employees a chief operations officer, delete and the following executive officers, and we use the letters of the alphabet accordingly.
Thank you so much, Senator Walcott, for your clarity.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that clause 3 stand part as amended.
The question is that clause 3 stand apart as amended. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Honourable senators against, please say nay. We think no, think the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Mr. Chairman, I believe clause 4 was raised by an honourable senator on the other side. I don't remember which senator it was. It was clause 4.3, where it said the board may employ the executive chairman at such remuneration and on such terms and conditions. I am suggesting now that we add on to that, we change the full stop to a comma, and as the minister may determine. So it would now read, the board may employ the executive chairman at such remuneration and on such terms and conditions, comma, as the minister may determine. And I beg to move that clause 4 stand part as amended.
The question is that clause 4 stand apart as amended.
Clause 4. Clause 4 don't only deal with amending, appointing, it also deals with removal. And I have a serious concern. This is a political appointment. No, it is not. This is a political appointment.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
And
I thank the honourable member, Mr. Chairman. I believe he's speaking to the removal of the executive chairman.
yes, sir.
And it says in the clause before us, it says, the executive chairman shall not be removed without the approval of the minister. I'm suggesting now, Mr. Chairman, that that be changed. The executive chairman shall not be removed by the minister without the approval of the cabinet.
Sir, still not happy. Even that is an improvement of what you had. But you know, in this system, cabinet and minister, the same thing, you know, because the cabinet approves, the minister approves, the cabinet approves what the ministers bring. So, you know, and that is it. I'm talking about, this is a political appointment. When the prime minister appoints a minister, when she goes, the minister goes. Now you're making a political appointment like hospital, that person should also go with you. Or else, we will have these situations where the government of Barbados.
Mr. Chairman, on a point of order, Senator Franklin seems to be attempting to make a second reading speech this afternoon during committee.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that the good senator read the rules. I can speak up to 15 minutes on any point here that is relevant to this thing. Read the rules. And so I can speak for 15 minutes, sit down and get up and speak for another 15. And another 15, and another 15. Okay, good. read the rules and then correct me, please. I am saying this is a political appointment. Is it a political appointment? I've been hearing that. I've even heard people here today saying the Prime Minister can appoint who they like. But if that is the case, if the Prime Minister likes you and she appoints you, when the Prime Minister goes, you go. Or else we will have a situation where an incumbent administration, PDP, will have a situation where the hangers-on from the last administration will be there to hamstring them, as happens all over the place. It's happening now, because we have political public servants who are blocking this government's agenda. You know that too. And I'm saying to you, if you have a civil servant who is not supposed to be political, who is a hanger-on from the last administration, blocking the current government's agenda, and mind you, they have their public service protections. Now you have a person who is not a public officer, who is a sworn Barbados Labour Party person, or whoever party is in power. You brought them in, and then a new administration come in, then that person stays in there and becomes a problem for the new administration. Any person appointed in this form should leave office when the government goes. It's as simple as that. It is a political appointment. You do not leave your hangers-on around to cause problems for the next administration. This is absolutely necessary. As a matter of fact, I do not intend to support this piece of legislation, but that is the only way I will give it my support. Because if you want to have a political, we're changing our system of government now, where we're having a system of contracts where politicians bring their people when they come. But if you bring them when you come, you got to take them when you go. No, that's the point. That's the point. I'm saying the government, not the minister, that's the point. If you are appointed under a Barbados Labour Party administration because you are a Barbados Labour Party hat, and for no other reason, because they wouldn't appoint me if I knew anything about running hospitals, in the good old days. In the good old days. Yes, I was a member of the Barbados Labour Party in the good old days when you people used to behave. You don't know. What more resignation you want? I don't pay you the dues. 6412. But so all I want, sir, is for the government to behave honorably. If you bring your people when you're coming in, you take them when you are going out. And this clause should be amended to say that this person demits office when the government demits office. It is only fair. Because then the situation will have, you can bring them in, and they're going to come in, and then you're going to call for unfair dismissal. And then that will be a charge on the government to pay compensation for unfair dismissal, when in fact that person shouldn't be there in the first place. And this person should not be covered by the provisions of the Employment Rights Act. So all I am saying to you is, put it in, and this thing, it is only fair. Thank you. I would like to see you draft that too.
Mr. Chairman, as it relates to subclause 3 of 4, the board may employ the executive chairman at such remuneration on such terms and conditions, etc. I'm wondering that since the minister shall, with the approval of cabinet, appoint an executive chairman, whether we should not say the board shall employ the executive chairman, because it's only obvious that if the minister shall appoint, the board must appoint. So I'm just querying whether that is an appointment that is necessary. I mean, an amendment that is necessary. If it's staying in, and you have, if it is that the minister shall, with the approval of the cabinet, appoint an executive chairman, we can't have a board that may employ the executive chairman. The board has to employ the executive chairman. So it has to be shall for the board as well. So then we're talking, Mr. Chairman, the truth of the matter is that I don't know if this is the place to be doing these types of queries and concerns. I know that the government wants this passed, but I mean, it is a relevant, it's a relevant point. We have the minister shall appoint the executive chairman. So the question is, why are we even making reference to the board employing the executive chairman? I suppose appoint and employ are two different things. Is that what we're saying? Anyway, if it is that the minister shall, with the approval of the cabinet, appoint an executive chairman, then the board shall employ the executive chairman at such remuneration and on such terms and conditions as the minister, what did you say? The minister may
I
determine.
shall repeat it now.
Okay. Now, before you rise, Mr. Senator Walker, I'm wondering, just out of curiosity, it just occurred to me, with Senator Mo's bill, CBC, wait, I'm just asking, Senator Mo had the CBC where the CEO and the CEO is to be appointed by the board with the approval of the minister. Wouldn't that make this more palatable? Rather than actually having a minister appointing somebody who, in essence, is going to become an employee of the hospital? Wouldn't that make it easier for everybody to relate to and come to terms with, and you would have less anomalies? You make your point, I ain't gonna make mine. I'm just asking because we have the precedent with the proposed amendments to the CBC legislation. And that's what's in a lot of the other bills as well. The other legislation as well. You have a board who appoints the head. We all know that the board is told what to do, but at least it's the board, because then it makes sense then to have the person an employee of the hospital, and it makes it a little more palatable, I suppose. But that's just a query. So there are 2 points I raised, the shall for the employment, and if you wanted to change from having the minister doing the appointment. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm suggesting that in clause 3, paragraph 3, the board will change the may to shall, employ the executive chairman at such remuneration and on such terms and conditions as the minister may determine. So I'm changing that may to a shall. At 9B, I'm saying that the executive chairman shall not be removed by the minister without the approval of the cabinet. As it relates to CBC and indeed to the QH, I believe CPC is guided by the policy decision which is taken at cabinet. In those circumstances, I beg to move that clause 4 stand apart.
As amended.
As amended.
The question is that clause 4 as amended stand apart. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Honourable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 5.
Mr. Chairman, in clause 5, I'm suggesting some amendments. I don't remember the honourable senator that raised the issues. Mr. Chairman, as one gets older, one's short-term memory seems to dissipate. At 5.3, where it said the minister may appoint the executive chairman, I'm suggesting that the minister shall appoint the executive chairman as chairman of the board. At 4, I'm to change that. It says the members of the board to be appointed under subparagraph 1 shall comprise. And I'm suggesting now that we will change that. The members of the board to be appointed under subparagraph 1 shall, in addition to the executive chairman, comprise, and at B, the chief medical officer ex officio or nominee of that officer, semicolon, and then we insert an. taking it out. You're taking it out. For tidiness. So it will read now, the members of the board to be appointed under subparagraph 1 shall, in addition to the executive chairman, comprise A, the permanent secretary, Ministry of Health, ex officio or the nominee of that person, B, the chief medical officer, ex officio or nominee of that officer, and, after the semicolon, and C, persons who possess blah, 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 blah. I beg to move that clause 5 as amended stand part.
The question is that clause 5 as amended stand apart. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Honourable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 6.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 6 stand part.
The question is that clause 6 stand apart.
Yeah. Clause 6. Clause 6 actually amends the schedule. Do we need this? Mr. Leader?
My advice is that we do.
Well, if you do, so be it, but it doesn't make sense. The point here is that we now have an employment rights tribunal that an officer who is dismissed from the hospital can appeal to. And when this was first mooted by NUPW, this is 6. No, but this says here the schedule shall be a thing. This says an amendment to the second schedule. No, it says the second schedule is the amendment to the second schedule. This is clause 6. The second schedule to the principal is deleted, and the second schedule is substituted as the second schedule. But no, you don't understand what I'm saying. The schedule is deleted, and this thing is substituted for it in its place. So I'm dealing with what is substituted in its place. But the schedule, I'm trying to explain or trying to understand. The schedule, you are deleting the second schedule by clause 6. And I am dealing with clause 6. All right? When NUPW was dealing with this matter, this was supposed to cover the officers who were already public officers. We are having less and less of them as more of them retire and new people come into it. It was never intended to cover all the employees of the hospital, only those persons who were public officers. Only those persons who were public officers when the board transitioned. So this was to protect them. Now, here, from what it looks like to me, this is dealing with all the officers, people who got appointed last week, people who get appointed next week or next year. And this was never the intention of the original negotiation or thing. But I'm saying to you, it is not necessary now because we have an Employment Rights Act that is better for the employee because appeals to the Privy Council are not heard. You write a letter to the Governor General and to the clerk to the Privy Council, and they discuss it, and you don't get a chance to put your case. It is better to have the Employment Rights Tribunal dealing with this matter, even though yesterday they may treat me good.
Mr. Chairman, the truth is about this section here, this schedule, there are some people to whom it will still apply, so you need to leave it. I'm not sure what Senator Franklin is referring to when he says it seems to apply to everybody. If you could be more specific, that would be useful, but this needs to stay for those persons to whom it still applies. So show me, or if you can explain what you mean by it appears to apply to everybody. Because you are correct when you say that the ERA would apply to everybody other than these people, but you can't exclude these people to whom this applies. So if you could help with that. You notice I didn't touch that when I spoke earlier today. My information is there are some people to whom it still applies at the QEH. So you have said it appears to involve everybody. But if you, I'm not sure if that is so. And it also makes reference to may be made, and an application may be made and writing to the Governor General. So there is an option other than the Governor General. It is not, the Governor General is still there for those to whom it applies, but it seems to me that with the use of the word may, the Employment Rights Act is applicable as well. It is not excluded. That's my humble suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I believe even the attorneys have misunderstandings about themselves. I beg to move that clause 6 stand part. Plural.
The question is that clause 6 stand apart. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Honourable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Schedule. No one told the schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Honourable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. With amendments.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee as amended. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Honourable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. Honourable members.
Sorry, Mr. President. I beg to move that the bill as amended be now read a third time, and I am indeed grateful to my colleague, Senator Tate.
I now reformulate the question, which is that the bill under consideration as amended be now read a third time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. No pass. No pass.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Act 2019.
She remains right.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill, a bill as amended, do not pass and be cited as the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Act 2019.
Question is that the bill under consideration as amended do now pass and be so cited.
I should ask with the right.
Honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The bill has now been passed and been cited as indicated.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this sitting be now suspended until 5:10.
Question is that this sitting be now suspended until 5:10? 5:10? Yes. Honourable members in favour of the suspension until 5:10, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We are now on suspension until 5:10.